Hey Inspire Tribe, how's it going? It's John Nolan here, and today we are going into conversation number 2 with Frank Jacob. We're going to talk about this mysterious new group that's come out, the Guardians of the Looking Glass. We're going to talk about the top secret technology, the predicted events, about quantum computing, about Dr. Wu, and the amazing opportunity that we have to change the timelines right now and create something completely new and different. But first, let's talk about your financial future and security. For years now, people have been setting up a little contest between crypto and gold, but that's like comparing an SUV to a truck. Both carry stuff and travel from A to B, but they do different jobs. Gold's job is to keep the value of your money safe and preserve its value. And since Ukraine and the oil and inflation crisis, it's done a brilliant job compared to stocks and other investments. So if you're thinking about your financial future, just talk to an expert at Noble Golds about precious metal IRAs for your retirement. They'll put you straight on your options and hold your hand through the whole process. And this month, for any qualified IRA, you'll get an incredible 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin completely free as a thank you. Call 877-646-5347 now to find out more, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. Again, that's noblegoldinvestments.com. Hey, Inspire Tribe, how's it going? It's John Nolan here for another inspired conversation, and back on our channel today, back for another interview, is Frank Jacob. Frank, thank you again for coming on and giving your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Frank, before we dive, and there's a lot of ground to cover, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you all so much for watching the first interview. And if you haven't yet, we're going to put the link up here and in the description so you can watch it and get caught up on what we discussed in the first interview. I just wanted to give a clear disclaimer here. What Frank and I are doing is not speaking for or against a certain theory that's out there, or a storyline. What we're doing is discussing something, shedding light on it, and bringing background information to a topic that's becoming kind of a trend, very popular right now, namely the Guardians of the Looking Glass, a mysterious group that's come out about a month ago and released a video that's connected to a top secret, which we thought former military and intelligence operation, Project Looking Glass, which allowed them to look into future timelines. And they've come out and claimed to have new projections into the future, namely 70 events until 2030. And that's what we began discussing in the first interview. Today, we're going a little deeper, diving further into it. But also, I first wanted to ask Frank, after I think 6 or 7 days and 200,000 views combined on the first interview, what's happened in your life? I think you've been pretty busy, right?
Oof. I mean, it's just overwhelming. It was not something I was expecting. You know, I found this crazy story out there. I wrote about it, and I thought we'd do a nice little interview. But it seems to have been very explosive, and I think it's caught, it's somehow caught fire with the spirit of a lot of people, because we're in these really bizarre times right now. We really do feel collectively that something's going on right now. We're coming up to kind of a precipice, you might say, or some climax because of world events, and that this group, Guardians of the Looking Glass, would suddenly show up with these, both ominous, very ominous, let's not kid ourselves, but also very, very positive. I mean, that's one thing that I've noticed, people forgetting that are talking about it, that are saying things about it. They're like, oh, it's so dark, but it's not just dark. It also paints the picture for us to envision, and also know the possibility is there for us to make a very amazing new Earth happen. So I think it's a very positive thing to talk about it. And and I've just been, inundated, obviously, with emails, and people are reaching out and they have questions, and I can't even keep up. It's just, I hope that people aren't mad if I don't get back to them right away. But it's just, I'm doing my best, and I'm trying to also, keep a day job going here. So, but I think it's great to be back on to talk about the event 2, because we didn't get a chance, to talk about event 2. And I think event 2 is very, very important for a number of reasons. Yeah. So I mean, I think we made a great dent. Like everyone, was saying, well, what's the point? What are we supposed to do? And, I don't know if there's anything really better to do than just to be talking about it, because if you look at this. This is the website now of the YouTube, just the YouTube channel. And from the day that I first connected with them, it was 80 views. And now we have 88,000 views on event 1, 34 on the Singularity, and 32 on event 2. Maybe we can bump those numbers up a little bit now, and they have 12,000 subscribers. So, I think that basically, we've shown that, that if there's a chance for us here to actually kibosh these plans for these, that's whatever we call them, the cabal, the elite, or whatever, the black hats, there's many, many words for them out there, then I think we've definitely put a dent in their plan. And if it actually does go through now, I think there's so many people that are talking about it, that know about it, that it'll add even more credibility to this message coming out of this, mysterious group. What I also want to say before we go into it is that, if you dig, anyone who's doing research into the Project Looking Glass from the past, and this goes back, I think, the first public outings of it started happening around 2002, I believe already. And, the one that most people know is the one, with this Bill Wood one out there. But I mean, one people don't really know is that there was a guy called Dan Burish involved. Dan Burish was probably far more involved than Bill Wood ever was, if Bill Wood even was involved, because we're now learning a lot about him, that he may be a total fraud. He might be a controlled opposition. So this guy, Dan Burish, he went way deeper into it, and he was actually interacting with this J-Rod extraterrestrial, which actually is one of our descendants, as crazy as it sounds, from 52,000 years in the future. And during the course of his interaction, of course, that's when the whole looking glass thing began to be deployed, and they were studying and analyzing it, and they basically were looking at these timelines. And the one timeline they all came up with at the end as being the most probable, they called it T1 version 83. And in that timeline, I'll tell you, I went back over it again the other day, just reading through some of my notes, and really none of it happened the way they, planned. So, which is and I know that there were actors going, in Congress that were aware of this project, and they were doing their best to steer away from these events from happening that were described in that T1 version 83, and somehow they managed it. So what I want to say is that each of us affects the timeline, even in the smallest little way, because basically, we have, in our actions and our thoughts, these ripple out into the universe. And, and we're going to go into this a little bit later on, into some of the stuff that Dr. Wu talks about this connection we all have. It's very, very fascinating what I found about him. We're going to dig into that a little bit. But essentially we have to know that we can affect the outcomes, to the timelines, if you will, through our thoughts and actions, first of all. But secondly, and also very, very important, we have to have a vision of what we want that new earth, that world, whatever we envision to be like. It can't be a vision of what we don't want. Yeah, that doesn't work. And it only works if you have a vision of what you do want. You have to know what your potential, what your abilities are, and what this world could be. And you also, thirdly, need to realize that there's people in control of technologies that gives them advantages over an unsuspecting public. So these people are rapidly moving to make their visions come true. And I think everyone who's watching this is probably already caught on to this, whole, great reset reality that they're moving us toward. And that there's people that are out there to thwart the plans of those people again, right? So like we're doing here with our discussion, so if there's nothing else to the Guardians of the Looking Glass, if it's just a total psyop, let's say even, there is one thing you can say about it. It's kind of a wake-up call for us now, and a reminder once again that we have to realize that there are agendas. There are those people out there that do have agendas, and they're coordinated, and they have lots of money, they have lots of power, they have lots of influence, and basically, I think it's safe to say that those of us who are listening, I'd call us like light activists, So we're basically looking at these scenarios, we're discussing these scenarios, we're seeing if we can shift the timeline to positive things because we're talking about it. And it's much better than, honestly, than just sitting on a couch watching a baseball game and eating popcorn, right? I mean, we want to see the timeline in which we're going to prosper. We want to see the place and the world that everything is going to be going, in the direction of where consciousness wants to evolve. The universe wants to evolve. The universe wants us to evolve with it. It wants to have that experience. We are connected to it. So, I think basically we have to come to terms with the fact that looking at the dark side is not a problem, is not going to manifest it, okay? We just need to know the goals of these people is like they want to do population reduction, it's transhumanism, they want to bring in a new monetary system, they want to link a currency to vaccination status, they want to destroy the idea of a healthy family, and by extension, nations, nationalism, right? I mean, it's a bad word now, right? It's like all these things basically are now considered by the woke crowd out there to be racist and gender phobic and whatever that means, right? So, I think basically that's where we're going. And so, I'd like to now dig into a little bit about event 2. One thing that's interesting that I noticed while I was doing some research is this guy. I came across a pretty stunning article that was just released on the 4th of April with him, where he says basically, we're going to basically, the Earth won't exist in 12 years, and he says, let's say if in interstellar space we discovered there's hundreds of alien civilizations. Well, I don't know about you, but someone on Earth needs to be in charge, and it sure as hell isn't going to be a planet full of individualism. A very interesting quote because, what does individualism mean, right? Again, it's basically us who are, individuals, but in a sense, we're also connected. But the way they've turned those words around, individualism, is the most negative form of individualism. I'm talking about individualism as sovereignty. We are sovereign beings, and we're sovereign nations, and that's a very, very high concept. And so there's a lot of, he's a lot in the spotlight, and now he's bought, majority share of Twitter or a major seat on the board of directors, and he can influence, and everyone's saying, yeah, he's going to turn it around, he's going to make it all good, there's no more censorship. What people aren't forgetting is that he's got a project in the go called Neuralink. And that Neuralink project is data mining as much as it can. So don't be fooled by...
where the idea came from that Elon Musk is, a shining knight for humanity. I don't know where that idea even came from, but apparently his PR team is very good because a lot of people believe that. And I would beg to differ and say it's quite the opposite. I believe he gives a very dark vibe off to me, and what he does to me is very dark.
Well, he's like Batman, everyone kind of like, we've all been trained in Hollywood films that there's some, super powerful rich guy who's like us and, is fighting the bad guys in the good fight. And it's a great, narrative, and everyone wants to believe it, right? So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there. It just sort of, because it kind of popped in while I was doing the research. But, let's look at, event 2. Event 2, we broke off on it at the end of our first show, and it has to do with this guy called Dr. Winston Wu and crypto and CERN, right? So let's read just a couple of the highlights of what the text of the Guardians is in event 2. They say Dr. Wu's project is called Raindrop Dow. Through his work using quantum computing, he's able to do great damage to the European power structure in the coming years. His project is currently underway and will reach completion in May. And from there, his work begins to expand all over the world. He begins to spend vast amounts of money to destroy the current world order. People involved in his project who are all over the world also help to fulfill his vision, and many others join him to bring down the current power structure. He's being targeted for elimination, and if nothing is done, he will be killed on May 20th, 2022. And you'll probably never hear anything about this because it's off the radar. This leads to the cessation of his project, the confiscation of his work, his funds, and the arrests of those involved. His project is destroyed, and the negative timeline is then further solidified His work is then also essential in disrupting the operations of the Large Hadron Collider, or CERN. If his life can be saved, he goes on to continue his work, and in doing so, prevents multiple horrific events that have been planned by the negative power structure. With the reactivation of CERN and repowering of CERN, which took place on March 22nd, just like a few days ago really, we believe the negative power structure has plans to disrupt the timelines to even greater degree, in ways that not even our data from the looking glass may have revealed to us. This concerns us greatly. Now, so we're going to talk a little bit about crypto, and we're going to talk a little bit about CERN and what is this deal about, how could CERN disrupt timelines. And I'm going to show you guys some of the evidence that's out there, some of the scientific evidence, and just for consideration, because it's pretty crazy, yeah? So I looked up, so the first thing I thought of was like, well, who is Dr. Wu? Does he even exist, right? Is he even a real person? So... And there's an article about him I found on this magazine, basically online, and you can see him in there. It was done very recently, back in December 2021. Essentially, he breaks down, what his project is really all about, and he describes, where he came from, his life story a little bit, and what led him to come into the position that he's in right now. And it's interesting because he was somebody that was in a family in China. They were not very wealthy. He always thought they were, they weren't poor, but, he was basically, not going to go anywhere in his life. And then but he was talented with electronics. And one day his uncle comes and basically invites him to join to become like a low-level specialist in a project that's taking place that Chinese government is doing. And then he walked into this project and into basically a deep underground military base, yeah. And he realized at that very moment, holy cow, my uncle is not some poor farmer guy that has nothing. He's actually a very high-ranking member of the Chinese Communist Party, and a very high-ranking intelligence agent. And he put him into this project that basically led him to several more years of education, culminating in the development of quantum computers for the Chinese government, right? So essentially, most people don't even really know much about quantum computers, and the way that artificial intelligence is sold to us these days, it's not exactly sold as anything that's maybe ominous. You might hear a bit of whispering here and there that people are uncertain what it means. But for the most part, they're all jovial about, it means like, I come home, my lights will be turned on. And if I drive in my car, the car pulls up and I get in and it drives me, to my destination. I can drink all I want and not have to worry about police and stuff. Those are the kind of, angles that are being sold. But, Wu learned a lot of other things when he was working on this project, and that really formed his mind. And I want to just quote a couple of them, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely.
That I find are very interesting. He said, quantum computers are being utilized for many operations, particularly prediction of human behavior, human responses, and extensively used in media and advertising and in psychological operations, psyops, like we were just talking. Every decision by media and government is game planned. Everything is planned in advance using quantum computers, AI, basically. And it's sort of a theory that I've always had when COVID happened. The absolute perfect orchestration of over hundreds and hundreds of countries that normally never communicate with each other within 2 weeks, for me, reeked of artificial intelligence control. But anyway, let's go on. We knew about the pandemic.
We had to cut off here. You guys know the drill. You can watch the full interview, which is over an hour, over in our new Locals Inspired community. We'll put the link here in the description. Just hop on there, watch the full interview free of charge, and listen to what Frank has to say. It's absolutely mind-blowing, important for all of our futures. So please hop over to our Inspired Locals community and watch the full interview and take this to heart and into action, what Frank is sharing with us today.